I'm very happy to introduce this distinguished panel of very experienced business developing experts. Yeah, I'd like to just start by introducing you. So, Tara Heitner, most recently from Ferring Pharmaceuticals, but you've also worked with big companies like Merck, for example, and also in small biotechs. Welcome. Sarah Fredriksson, CEO of Aqilion, also founder of Genovis, and quite a lot of experience in the deal-making space as well. Anu Balendran, you have the longest title. Senior Director Due Diligence Research and Early Development from Novo Nordisk. You can? Oh, that's great. Next year, perhaps. Yeah. But you also worked at AstraZeneca and also on the biotech side, Alligator Bioscience. And then we have Toon Berkien. You are actually currently CBO at Cantargi, but you have also some experience from big pharma, Takeda, New Evolution, not a big pharma, but you got acquired by big pharma, and Amgen. So you guys bring a lot of different perspectives, both from the biotech side and from the big pharma side, which is great, I think. And we all know that business development is a big deal. So the big question here is, how do you get to a deal? How do you get a deal done? And I'd like to start by asking you each, do you have like a superpower that makes you good at deal making? What about you, Sarah?
So the superpower I don't know, but I have a super team. So I represent a small biotech. And from day one, you need to have someone working committed with business development, and that person has to work very close with the scientific part of the team. It's a co-work and it takes time. So I think the superpower is to be patient and have a good team and try to figure out who you're meeting. If you know a lot about big pharma, you have a good starting point. I think that's for me a first advice.
And Anu, then you are on the big pharma side. What is your superpower there?
I think I go with Sarah. It's really a persistence game. So you need to build over time both your scientific package and also the relationships and keep people informed. I mean, it takes time. You got to have the patience and the persistence, and I think that's the important part. Even on our side, to follow science and to wait for that.
And what about you, Tara? What are your specific strengths when it comes to deal making?
Well, I like to think that I really love science. I have a scientific background, but I've always had this capability of being able to translate complex ideas in a simple way to people and good storytelling behind the topic to engage people. And then the other part is to build relationships with business developers and scientists, because deals can take many months, even years before they're established, and that requires building strong relationships where people want to work with you.
So I guess also then patience is quite a superpower that you might need.
Yes, resilience, patience, and you get a lot of doors slammed in your face, so you have to kiss a lot of frogs, as they say.
That's great. Toon, somehow I imagine you're a good poker player. Is that one of your superpowers as a deal maker?
I have never played poker, not even during my student years. Types of poker. No, I think what is very important to me is, besides of course that you involve your scientific team very early in the partnering part, so that all the operational things that you need to have in place when you start discussing with companies, that is something you have to not pay attention to. That is in place. On the other hand, BD is just like research. You fail 99 out of 100 times. And I think, therefore, you need to be very efficient in your resource allocation. So bring your team in when you truly think it is needed. Otherwise, leave them a bit out so they can do their things. So I think that's especially for biotech companies where resources are scarce, you need to be very efficient and not being too over-enthusiastic that suddenly Pfizer is knocking on your door.
That could make you enthusiastic, I guess. So to partner with someone, first you need to find that partner. And I guess in social life you have dating apps, but how do you go about it how did you, for example, end up meeting with Merck that you made a deal with, Sarah?
So I think that's part of when you choose your program. So you have to scout and know who's out there to take the project to the clinic. And how to do that? Well, there is a lot of meetings, of course, but I would say that you need to map the potential partners. They could be 10, they could be hundreds, you don't know. And then you have to kind of find out how to reach them. And for Aqilion's case, we started really early meeting the potential partners, showing our data room, ask them for what would you like to see to meet us again, really, really early on. And that was one key. So I do believe that you have to meet these teams in person, but you should be prepared when you meet them. So that, like we say, we don't have tons of resources, so time is important. I'll start with that one.
Mm. And Toon, you mentioned being efficient and also prioritizing them when it's time to bring in the team, the rest of the team. But where do you go to scout for potential partners?
Well, finding partners is not the issue, I think, because you have the bioconferences, you have, well, these days, of course, everything is done by teams, or at least a lot of initial interactions with pharma. So I think that is not necessarily the problem in finding a partner. I think the challenge is getting involved in the R&D part of the organization of a partner. And that's, of course, where you also need to bring your R&D team to make buddies over there. Because at the end of the day, you're selling science, right? And a BD person, with all respect, especially me, I'm an economist by training, so I don't have the scientific background and I cannot provide the details that the other side may want to hear. I can definitely facilitate that. My role is much more around the structuring, the negotiations and the contracting. And that's good, because in a biotech company, again, you have these different roles where you can bring people forward or not. And I think, and I'm adhering to your approach as well, you need to select your partner. So if you talk to them and you have a specific indication that you're developing your program into, then you know roughly where you need to find your partners. So I think that's, the partnering finding is easy.
Yeah, it sounds good that it's easy. Anu, on the receiving end, or what you can call it, do you sit back and relax and wait for all the companies to come to you, or do you go out?
Yeah, we're out in the beach almost. No, I think, I mean, and I think others will echo on this, is pharma companies, when looking out, are using two things. One is you are proactively looking for something. So there is a strategic identification of a strategic need, then you map who is out there with that type of a program, and you're approaching them proactively. So that's one way where you go out and find what you want. Secondly, reactive in terms of people you meet in bioconferences. It's exploratory. It's something different to what you were looking for, maybe close there. Then you start building up that interaction with them. So those both work. But what I would think is, Ton says you can, and like Sarah said, you can identify who's out there. But it's also important to now engage with different parts of that large organization. So I would say there's not just a role for the BD person to go find their BD guy and tell them what it is. All of your scientists can also play a big part. When they're out in conferences, talking to people from the big pharma, if you can get somebody interested in your scientific concept and idea, that plays a big role, because now you're building a champion within the large organization to stand up for your scientific idea.
That's great. And Tara, when you were on the side where you were looking for partners or looking to find a perhaps bigger company to partner with in the small biotech, did you cast a wide net, or did you more like stalk specific individuals?
Stalking is always good, and I did have success stalking. But there's many tools you can use. So obviously you have the platforms at BioEurope, and those are good. But you have to complement that with other strategies, because after you have your 30-minute meeting, there's not, you have to follow up. So oftentimes it's hard work. You travel all the way to California and you have these long days. But oftentimes it's at the reception later in the evening when you meet the same person and you're having a drink, you're talking socially. That's when the relationship is built. There's times when I've, for example, reached out to a company like Takeda like 7 times through different avenues. You should never give up just because one person at a pharma says not interested. You can go in through many doors. I got the door slammed in my face like 10 times at one company, but then I went to the booth and I just went up to someone, and she happened to be the inventor of HER2. And I spoke to her, and we connected because I was an antibody engineer as well. And then we made the deal. So it's about resilience, it's about being resourceful, going to give pitches. So they have a lot of pitch events at the conferences where companies can apply to stand up and give a 5-10 minute pitch. People will be interested if you give a very good story. And the other side of the deal, like these pharmas are often giving talks, right, and at conferences like this to tell what their strategic focus is. And that's a really good way to ambush the person, is when they get off the stage, you ambush them and you say, well, I have something you'll be interested in.
Take a hint, people. So I hope that one of the doors slamming in your face from Takeda was not when Tom was working there. No, you don't have to answer that.
That was before Tom's time.
I don't think so. I don't slam doors.
No, so, but it sounds like it's important to involve certain parts of your team. Also important to find ambassadors within the bigger company, perhaps. What will be once you get the attention of a big pharma? What will be then the secret sauce that makes them hooked? What do you need to have in place in order to get that second date? What do you say, Sarah? What was it for you?
I believe it was extremely important that our data room was really in a good shape, that we could open it instantly. We understood from the beginning that this will take time, but as a small biotech, we should not be the party that take time. So we understood that we had to wait. It's a completely different organization on the other side. So have your data ready, have your team ready to answer to all the Q&As. Have your legal team up there, because it takes time to negotiate. So once you meet someone, sign a CDA and get them into the data room, that's just the beginning. And then there is this patience of negotiating and remembering that this is your future partner for many, many years to come. So you have to bear that in mind when you do the negotiations. And the lesson learned from my side was to understand the organization on the other side. It's different. It's a huge difference from what we have internally. And try to understand that from the beginning. Then you know where the decisions are made, for one thing.
Speaking of decisions being made, and Anu, I know that in your current role, you come perhaps in a little later, but you have also been on the scouting side, right? What did you need to see to sort of go for a second date with the company?
I think the word that you're going to hear a lot is differentiation. I think that's, don't ignore that. And that is important for us, for me as an internal champion, to kind of take it to other stakeholders to make them interested to it. So that's a key thing. I mean, you got to have a credible story for your compound on how it will be better than what's out there, because many of the diseases today, it's not it's not new entrants. There are a few diseases where you have nothing and you can come as a new entrant. You all have to be better than what's out there and what will be out there in the future. So that is an important part of the story that you have to, bring out very clearly with the good evidence that somebody can use internally to really champion that with multiple stakeholders, right? You're not just the decision makers at the very beginning. At that point, you have to buy into lots of people. You have to buy into your R&D. You have to buy into CMC, commercial, medical, all of those people. So there's got to be a credible, good package for you to use.
So identifying the different decision makers within the other organization is key then. Where would you say that you are most likely to find an ambassador? You mentioned then being perhaps at a reception over drinks that maybe facilitates the discussions, but who do you think is most important to sort of grab onto and build a relationship at the early stage of a partnering process?
It is different from company to company. Oftentimes it's a therapeutic area heads who are, the best people to grab their attention with your elevator pitch. In smaller companies, like it could be the CEO or the board or the executive, committee. So it really depends on who you're trying to partner with. I think with big pharmas like Pfizer and Merck, you really need to go to, working at Merck, all of the BD people that I worked with had strong scientific backgrounds with PhDs, so you could really go quite deep on a scientific level. And at other companies I've worked at, like Sharing in the past, that was the same. So it's important to make multiple contacts in a company to make sure that you interest many levels.
And having then gotten the attention of a big pharma and you actually go into the second date perhaps and you show them some data and so on, when do you typically enter the real due diligence phase, Toon?
I think that actually comes earlier and earlier these days. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, I think it was very common that you had CDAs, you had confidential presentations, and on the basis of maybe some additional discussions, you got to a non-binding term sheet stage. I think that is shifting a little bit more towards that they want to do a level of due diligence before they actually put up a term sheet to you. And when you get that in place, agreed upon, despite the fact that it's non-binding, before you actually move further in your process. Because for a biotech company, a process with a due diligence is quite resource intensive. It's not the operational things that I was talking about. That should be in place, also as you are saying. But when you have these due diligence processes, you have basically the full team of the partner involved. That is CMC, regulatory, commercial to a lesser extent, I believe, depends a little bit where your program is. Pharmacovigilance, so safety is very important for big pharma. So all these disciplines need to be basically, discussed with your own team, right? And I think that will be the next step, and you need to be prepared to go there. So non-binding term sheet, get that in place, preferably as soon as possible, and then move very swift, as a biotech can do, at least they pretend they can do that, into the due diligence.
And Sarah, when you, before you struck the deal with Merck, then how did you find the due diligence process? Was it as intense as Tom describes it?
Yes, it was, and we actually we had like a pre-data room before we had, so that was a really early process, but I think it was good because we understood what was expected of us throughout the deep DD process. And I agree, you talk with so many different people on the other side. The commercial have their focus, clinical development comes in early. Even if we had a really early program, they plan ahead, of course. So it was intense. We were all involved in one way or another, and we made sure to give proper Q&A sessions where we really properly understood the questions. So it was just not written questions. We really did meet in person to explain, and that was good too. We got to know each other, and those teams that we eventually were going to work with, they come in late in the process, putting up a project team, for instance.
Yeah. I mean, just to add to that, I think Ton's concept that it's becoming early and early. In my new role, I am kind of in charge of trying to coordinate due diligences. I push back a lot to say, while you're on pre-due diligence, we don't need to get the whole 50 people team, everybody from quality assurance, regulatory, CMC, this, that, and the other. We need to get to the critical elephant in the room questions, identify them, and address them, which means that then I think from our side, we are saying to our scientists and our technical teams, ask for that specific data set and then get the other side to load it up. So I mean, just to open up, like you were saying, you have a pre-due diligence data room and a diligence data room, a confirmatory. Sometimes it's a way for you to not get them lost in the jungle with a few people before they moved into, that have provided a non-binding term sheet. Control it a little bit and focus them onto the key data at that stage so that you don't just flood them with too much. Because then the team moves into this huge number of people, and they've got term sheet, they've got more approvals done internally, then it's much more definite and you're opening up a lot more. And it also means that they bring in the right experts. Because you might just trigger off something unnecessary if you flood them too early, too quickly as well.
So the due diligence phase, and we also talked about negotiation. Are those phases sort of intertwined, or is it always like due diligence first and then we start to negotiate? How does it work? What would you say, Tara?
The negotiation phase comes at a certain point. These are very structured processes in the big pharma. And for example, at Ferring, Merck, there's a process where you don't even enter due diligence formally without approval from a higher body. So the project, you have to have that internal champion who is presenting your project internally to a scientific board, and they give you approval to go forward in due diligence, because you have to imagine doing a full due diligence on a company requires a lot of resources also for a big pharma, and a lot of people are engaged. They're not just doing one due diligence, they're doing many due diligences in parallel, oftentimes comparing your project with similar projects either in the same indication or with the similar MOA. So you have this process ongoing, and they can't run 20 due diligences in parallel. They can maybe run 3, or 2 or 3, and then if you get to that point, that's actually a really amazing achievement. But then you have to perform in the due diligence as well. Negotiation comes to a point where you have to get approval to actually on the term sheet to be able to present, and then that also has to get approved by an internal body before you can actually go to the agreement phase. So everything is very structured, at least in my experience.
Many checks and balances along the way. Then is that your experience as well, Toon, from both of the sites that you've been on?
Yeah, I mean, talking about Amgen, there's a triaging that any big pharma company or big biotech company does. So that is pretty straightforward to make sure that you can move to the next level, right? And as Amgen, they have, of course, a whole legal team, and you want to make sure that they are involved in how the process is going. In the biotech, you use your external counsel to make sure that, okay, we're looking at these kind of structures, these kind of additional things may come to the original structure. Looking at New Evolution, when it got acquired by Amgen, you have roughly, despite the fact that this is a relatively easy deal and share purchase agreement is not very complicated, still there were more than 100 people in the data room, and that was 50-50 Amgen and 50% was consultants. In the New Evolution deal, it was very important to make sure that the post-merger integration part and all the people-related issues were taken care of. So there was a huge HR due diligence team from externals into the data room. So I think there is a separation between due diligence and negotiations, or let's see, the contracting part. You want to make sure, as you say, balancing act, you want to make sure that the stakeholders that are present in those stages are updated on the next steps, which may happen or not.
So assuming everything goes well and you are deep into negotiation and you start talking about things like price, money, stuff like that, how do you reach common ground on, for example, valuation? How did it work out for you, Sarah, when you got the deal with Merck? You had about 100 million SEK in upfront, for example. How did you reach that number?
Obviously, we started higher, right? But this was a really early program, and I think negotiation takes time, and price and valuation is one part of that. There is so much else that you have to put into that term sheet, because it's either a very long partnership or either part finds out that they don't want to continue. So yes, it's difficult. I think you should evaluate. For us, we had an idea around valuation on the early program by comparing with other similar assets, comparing with different deals done in the space before within inflammation and autoimmune diseases. But the rest is, yeah, it's negotiation, it's give and take, and I don't have a special formula for that. I think if both parties want to reach the goal where you have really nice collaboration and a good deal, you will settle that one. I guess the other ones maybe have more experience on finding the right value or price, but for us that was the way we worked.
How was it for you when Evolution was acquired, for example? How did the turns go in negotiating the price?
I can not go into too much details about it, but at the time that we were acquired, I think the share price was at 12.50 or something like that, Swedish crowns, because we're listed in Stockholm. And the board had indicated we want to see around 35 or something like that. So that's a big gap, right? And in between, well, at the end of the day, everybody knows, because you can easily calculate that, the company got sold for 32.5. So obviously there is a compromise. What hindsight, because I became part of Amgen, I have seen that the valuation could be even stretched upwards, but okay, that's just the way it is. I think the shareholders in New Evolution were happy with the results, and that I think is very important to know, because then at least you find common ground. And these days, M&A deals are almost financially structured like licensing. There are still milestone payments, CVRs to be established and accomplished, of course, based on future events. So an M&A structure is not everything up front these days. It's the same with asset deals. The only thing with an asset deal, you don't have royalties. And in M&A, obviously, no royalties either. And that's, I think, the main differences between deal structures these days, despite the fact that an M&A is not really a partnership, because you get acquired, and of course, the company that acquires you wants to make the best out of it, right? In a licensing, you have, just like a marriage, you have your ups and downs. And that is less applicable in straight purchasing.
So having more than one bidder is, of course, a dream scenario when you're in the negotiation. Are there any dirty tricks? Can you invent a secret bidder, second bidder, Anu? Would you call that bluff?
I think that's at your peril, because we had this discussion yesterday. You can have a genuine competitive situation, and it's really great if you inform people who are already looking at it. This is where I've got somebody else. This is how far they've gone. You build trust. And if you're just trying to drop it in, the BD and everybody on the other side is watching, right? Also remember, sometimes we're talking to our peers. So, you can get caught out. And also, if you try to rush them when they're trying to really get into the grip of your science, and you're rushing them to a no. It's easier to say no than a yes. So be careful with how you use competitive situations. But if it exists, and if you do have it, then it's to your advantage, and that really can help you move the price tag.
I just wanted to comment that it's maybe not good to pressure the company that you're already in due diligence with, but you can use it to encourage the ones who are on the fence, who haven't yet entered your data room, to hurry up and enter your data room so that you are in a competitive process. Having at least 2 people in your data room is always a good position to be in, and that's where you're going to get the true valuation of your asset, because they're going to give you an idea of what the market value is.
So it's maybe a silly question, but when you speak about 2 people in the data room, is it like when you have open bidding process when you're buying a house? Can others see that someone else is in there, or?
Well, like I said, you should maybe use the information not to pressure the first company, but to encourage additional companies to that there is an interest from from the market, and you're in the process, and if they want to join then and be part of that, because otherwise it may not be on the market anymore, like a house. So yeah.
I mean, it's confidential. So, and this is the totally unregulated marketplace, this one. So that's exactly why it's so difficult to find out exactly how genuine and how far others are.
Sarah, it looks like you have something to add on that.
No, but signing multiple CDA and having more than one in the data room is a good thing, of course. Then you know that there is an interest. But I think you should be very careful with the ones you have in the data room, like the panel said, and be patient with them. But there's nothing stopping you from having more than one. And I think you should, take good care of them both then.
Just a follow-up question on the valuation part or the price negotiation. Seeing as you out-licensed an early stage project, preclinical even, how do you sort of hold your own against the big boys? That was not my words, but someone said big boys. When you are in a obviously sort of a high-risk project, is it easy for them to just say, well, it's such a high risk, we need to lower the price?
I think that's all about differentiation. So in our case, we had something new, and we could back that up by data, and there was an interest from more than one player. But of course, I think the pressure from the one that's on the other side, you will have that, but there is a balance. If you have a good program, it's differentiated and they want to be first. And I think we were lucky to have such situation in our case, yeah.
So I got so caught up in this interesting conversation that I forgot about time. So when looking at the watch, we're already 3 minutes over time. So I would love to ask 100 more questions, but we don't have time for that. So thank you very much for coming today.